Russia's economy's in tatters. It's savaged by inflation. That it's teetering on the brink of collapse. So Trump takes that information because he believes it. So Russia holds the cards in this negotiation. And unfortunately, some of those same Zionist characters I described, they're weighing in on this stuff too. And they believe, oh yeah, Putin has to negotiate. Putin doesn't have to do a damn thing. Putin's not going to be bullied, not going to be coerced, and they're certainly not going to go out and just agree to any temporary ceasefire or halt in the fighting. They've got the Ukrainians on the run now. Ukraine is completely on its back heels and doesn't have any way to turn this around. Just over the weekend, Velikia Novosilka, which was a key logistics center, that is completely under control of Russia. Chazov Yar is almost completely under control. Toretsk under control. So after this, there's really only one big remaining population center in the western Donetsk that bumps up against the border with Dnipro. And then once they're done, once that goes, the road is open to the Dnieper River, to Dnipropetrovsk. The assumptions that Donald Trump holds with respect to the situation for the Russian government in Ukraine are completely false. He believes that Russia's suffering horrendous casualties. Good Lord, the Ukrainians are killing them right and left. Now, Ukraine's lost a lot, but Russia's lost more. No, that's not the case, Mr. President. And that economic chaos is not confined to Germany. It's in the United Kingdom. It's in France. And in places like Austria, Slovakia, Romania now, you've seen the pushback against this, World Economic Forum vision for Europe, and that it's flowing more towards nationalists, people opposed to that, and people who are not interested in going to war with Russia. So, Tusk popping off like this is just one more example of activities that are going to fracture Europe, not bring them together. This highlights why, the real problem that NATO faces. It's not, we kept hearing under Joe Biden how unified NATO was. They're not unified at all. Tusk is threatening, Poland's threatening Hungary, and with sanctions and with, punishment. And then to come out and say this, look at what's the German economy is in crisis. And the economic crisis is generating support for parties like AfD, the AfD party, the Alternative for Deutschland in Germany, that previously wasn't there. I offered, my belief that, well, it's not belief. We have Bill Burns, the former CIA director under Biden. That's what the CIA was telling Trump, and Trump has believed it. But when you start with those assumptions, I could see Trump saying, oh, yeah, as I look at this, I believe that Russia's really, they can't sustain losses like this anymore, and their economy's teetering. Yeah, they'll make a deal. I'll bully them into it. But when those assumptions are false, and Vladimir Putin's sitting there looking and saying, we've suffered losses, and the soldiers are mourned. They're heroes of Russia, the motherland. But we're killing 10 Ukrainians for every one of us that die. I mean, just the other day there was the Israelis and Ukrainians traded bodies of dead soldiers for every single Russian returned to Russia. For every single one that the Russians turned over to the Ukrainians got 15 back, 15 to 1. That's a horrific number. Now, there was a leak yesterday out of Ukraine claiming it was Trump's peace plan. And, very elaborate. Again, the false assumptions. You always got to look at what do we assume are the basic principles. And within that, the assumption was that Russia's army is failing and that the Ukrainians can rapidly rebuild and challenge Russia. No, it can't. And that's one thing Russia's going to make certain doesn't happen. The agreement that will conclude this war will include prohibitions upon any kind of military that Ukraine has had being, reconstituted. Russia's not going to allow this threat to reemerge. That's simple. The war is going in Russia's favor, and it's going against Ukraine's favor, and therefore Trump has no leverage. He thinks he's got, he genuinely believes that he's got some leverage over the Russians. He doesn't. Oh, we're going to impose tariffs. Russia will go, okay, we're selling you uranium. You need uranium. You're like the diabetic that needs that insulin injection every day. And so this is sort of like what it is. The United States is the diabetic, and we're going to the supplier of the insulin. By God, you do what we say, or we're going to charge you 25% more for the insulin that we pay for. And so they go, okay, go ahead and pay more. I don't care, because you still got to buy what I have. So when you're jacking that price up, you're the one that's going to suffer. That's exactly what what Trump's talking about here. A self-inflicted wound. Not smart, but it goes back again. He's getting some bad information, and he's not thinking critically about this yet. Maybe he will. Putin and Xi get on a Zoom call like we are, and they're talking like you and I are. And they went through, Xi's telling Putin, yeah, hey, Trump called up and, funny guy. And let me tell you what he said, and told him what he said. And, they're sharing information back and forth. But it was, just a reminder, they're going to coordinate. They recognize that if they start, if the United States divides them and tries to pit them against each other, that they're going to be vulnerable to U.S. subversion. They recognize that the United States is out of control when it comes to trying to subvert other governments. Many in the West, I think this is something that's also important for people that are listening to you or watching you to understand that with the incoming Trump administration, there are several, particularly this new, he's a senior official designated, Elbridge Colby at the Department of Defense. And Colby's big thing is China, dealing with China. And there's the notion that the United States is, on the one hand, we're going to oppose Russia and defeat Russia and Ukraine. But on the other hand, we want to develop relationships with Russia to split Russia off from China. Because the fact of the matter is that U.S. policy for 50 years is predicated on keeping China and Russia apart. Well, now they're together. And while they haven't signed a mutual defense treaty, it is, I would argue that they have a de facto mutual defense treaty in place, that their cooperation is not just economic, but it is also military. It's also political. And the Chinese have they have a different approach than the Russians. I mean, they're just culturally different. But the friendship that has been established between Putin and Xi, I think is genuine, and they are serious about working together to thwart the ambitions of the United States as a hegemon. That was why, a week ago Monday, so a week ago this time, we were looking at Donald Trump being sworn into office. Man, seems like that's like ages ago. Well, now he says he's not going to impose them because, for people that don't know what happened, the United States had at least 2 military plane loads of illegal migrants that had been arrested and were being deported. And several of them were Colombian, so they're being deported back to Colombia. And the president of Colombia refused to let the planes land. Hell no. So Trump said, okay, we're imposing 25% tariffs, and we're going to impose other sanctions on Colombian officials, and we're pulling your visas, and you're not coming to the United States, and if this doesn't, we'll go up to 50%. Well, actually, Colombia is in no position to fight the United States on that, and so reportedly the Colombian president, in a face-saving gesture, while going on and criticizing Trump by name and defying, we're not going to surrender to you. He sent his Colombian aircraft to the United States to pick up the migrants and bring them back. Pete Hegseth is he's not an independent thinker on this. He's there to carry out Donald Trump's orders. I don't know Pete Hegseth. My own personal view is he's way too young and way too inexperienced to hold that job. We'll see if I'm wrong. He could turn out to be a boy genius. But one thing is certain, he's there not to pursue his own agenda. He's not on the payroll of some military industrialist. He's there to serve Donald Trump and the American people, and to root out the whole diversity, equity, inclusion forces that have really emasculated the Department of Defense. All Trump wanted was to get rid of the illegal migrants. He didn't care how they got out of the country, just as long as they go. And so once the Colombian president did that, Trump said, "Okay, well, we'll hold off on those 25% tariff." Now, Trump can get away with that with Colombia because we've got leverage over Colombia. Can't do that. My fear is he sees the effectiveness of that with Colombia, and then he says, I'll do the same thing to Russia. It won't work with Russia or with China for that matter. So, yeah, Trump can raise it with King Abdullah of Jordan and General Sisi in Egypt. And they're going to tell him the same thing they told Obama. There are two ways we can do this. No way and no way in hell. Not going to happen. And the Palestinians, this isn't just about finding them a nice place to live. Their demonstration today that they are going back to this, as Trump was accurate calling it pure devastation. Nonetheless, it shows that for those people, this is their land. This land is ours, and from their standpoint, God gave this land to them, not to the Zionists. Hamas fighters, the Al-Qassam brigades, they weren't wearing ragged uniforms. They were brand new. They looked clean. They were well put together. They actually reflected some uniformity. Hence in the army, that notion of wearing a uniform. The weapons they were carrying looked to be in good shape and almost new. And then today, you got 1 million plus Palestinians heading north. I mean, they're walking. These people, how they've survived is astonishing. And it's ironic. I haven't heard anybody comment on this. Trump fails to realize that. What's interesting is Trump's intervention with getting the ceasefire in place. It's sort of blown up on Netanyahu and the Zionists, because they were told, the Israeli public had been told now for the last 15 months that, Hamas is destroyed. Qassam is defeated. So the hostages are not alive. Well, now it looks like most of the hostages are still alive, which is testimony to the ability of Hamas to, kept them safe. And unlike how the Zionists treat Palestinian prisoners in prisons, where they're subjected to torture and abuse, up to and including physical beatings, the Al-Qassam fighters and there are other Palestinian groups that are holding some of the hostages themselves. They're treating the Israeli hostages because they recognize they're valuable. You can't mistreat the merchandise, so to speak. Well, in fact, if you've watched, I've read some of the Israeli media on this, and But they're saying, see, these guys, they hide themselves in civilians, so that's why we got to kill all these civilians. I mean, they're using it to justify genocide. And, people think, oh, well, I get particularly irritated with some of my fellow American citizens who will say, oh, that's an issue. How dare Hamas do that? Guys, read your damn history. That was my ancestors fighting the British, fighting the colonial empire. We were civilians. They were militia. So, they didn't go sign up and have to, get like a union card or for the Screen Actors Guild. No. Yeah, they are intertwined with the civilians because they're fighting for the rights of those Palestinian people. So, again, it's just one more example of the Israelis don't get it, the majority. And it is important to note, though, that there are several Jewish individuals and organizations that are in sync with the Palestinians about, they need to have their homeland. They need to be free. Well, one thing you've not seen in Gaza that you see on a daily basis across the Ukrainian front are the use of FP drones, and these drones used as attacking forces. So they use both to collect intelligence as well as to destroy fortifications, personnel, vehicles. I'm really sort of surprised, actually, that we haven't seen that by the Israelis. And I don't know why, because I believe that they've got the ability to do it, but they haven't. If they started doing that might have actually had more of a decisive effect, because, the smaller drones can actually fly into tunnels. We've seen, like in Ukraine, the Russians, there are like these sewer pipes where Ukrainian soldiers are hiding in them. Drones fly right in there and blow up, or they fly into the back of vehicles. So that's one thing we've not seen the Israelis try, and I don't know if it is, lack of resources, lack of, vehicles. I don't know what it is. Okay, they were taken hostage. They were taken against their will. Why did that happen? Well, for every single Israeli that was taken hostage, the Israelis are taking hostages, but they don't call them hostages, and the West doesn't call them hostages. They're prisoners, implying that they have committed a crime, and Israel just throws them into jail. Now, a few of them get presented with charges and convicted, but the vast majority are not. And this is inhumane, and so just a complete difference. And that's why Hamas took these hostages, to get leverage, to get some of the people, and they're it's happening. They are getting 200-300 prisoners released, hostages, Palestinian hostages released for every Israeli. For these 4 girls, I guess there's like 300 Palestinians released. So, I'm not saying that it's right that Hamas does that. It's certainly not right that the Zionists do it, but it's a reality, and that's why it's happening. The Israeli approach was genocide. The Russian approach is not genocide. The Russian approach is they want to demilitarize, but they're not going to kill, mounds and mounds of civilians to accomplish that. And yet the ones killing the civilians in the Ukraine conflict are the Ukrainians. They insist that the United States is going to, in Israel, they'll wipe out the Houthis, wipe them out. They haven't wiped out anything. They can't even wipe their own ass right now, it would appear. And that they're going to attack and destroy Iran's nuclear program. So they indulge this sort of military pornography, this vicious, violent fantasy. Doesn't come to pass when in fact, Iran's not playing the game. And, it's actually the spillover effect. You're seeing it in southern Lebanon, too. Hezbollah is intact. Remember, we were told, oh, Syria, Assad's gone. Man, Hezbollah done. It's over, dude. No, that's not what happened. They're still largely intact. And it's Israel that's actually overextended. And then Israel's now talking about, oh, we got to be prepared to fight Turkey. Their big buddies up north that is continuing to supply them oil for now. So this has really created some problems for Bibi Netanyahu. And it'd be one thing if it's just a political issue for Bibi, but he's also got health issues. Reportedly has prostate cancer. They had to put it in a pacemaker. It's reported, and he's got some, family. So Bibi's not having a good 2025. The Gentile New Year is not treating him well. Then this political pushback that started within the Israeli public, where they're going, hey, wait a second. Not only did we not destroy these people, they're back stronger than ever. And everything that we claimed we had achieved, we haven't. It's there on it. Well, you can see it. You can't hide from the images. Yeah, look, the United States doesn't have enough money to buy off Sisi on this. And that, what Trump was, Trump's not the first one to suggest, well, why don't the Jordanians, the Egyptians take these pesky Palestinians? Well, it reflects ignorance on the part of the American public that believe that, without any understanding or appreciation about what that land means to those people, what being in that particular area. Now, look, it's not great in terms of geography, in terms of physical features. It's not like you got the mountains of Hawaii coming up against the ocean and this, deep blue ocean, just beautiful. It's got some nastiness to it, but it is invested with centuries, literally centuries of these people, their families, their grandfathers and grandmothers, their great-grandfathers, great-grandmothers, ancestors, generations of ancestors born and died in that area. And so they're not going to walk away from it. And there is, within the Palestinians, they hold a different view of, let's call it, relationships with family and with extended family and with ancestors and with heritage than your average American. I mean, the average American is not really tied to any particular piece of land, or because we don't have a long history here. I mean, my ancestors showed up here 400 years ago, so that's something. But we didn't settle in just one place and stay there and said this is our land. Hamas fighters, the Al-Qassam brigades, they weren't wearing ragged uniforms. They were brand new. They looked clean. They were well put together. They actually reflected some uniformity. Hence in the army, that notion of wearing a uniform. The weapons they were carrying looked to be in good shape and almost new. And then today, you got 1 million plus Palestinians heading north. I mean, they're walking. These people, how they've survived is astonishing. And it's ironic. I haven't heard anybody comment on this. So we are now 15 months since Israel retaliated for the Hamas attack on October 7th with allegedly the most powerful army in the Middle East. And they were going to destroy Hamas. And what did we see the other day when those the 4 Israeli soldiers, the females, were released? They were smiling. They were happy. Some folks try to claim that this was staged. This was, staged in terms of they had a gun to their head. Be happy. Oh, I'm so happy. No, that's not what was going on. It was genuine, and there was even posted on one of the social media platforms them speaking Arabic, and and they were healthy. They weren't raped. Well, I've been through the international airport in Istanbul, just outside of Istanbul, 3 times over the last year. Boy, if that's an Islamist That's an example of Islam and Islamist tendencies. Give me more. Place is amazing. So they have built the Turks have built a phenomenal airport, and it is an incredible operation. In the main hall, it's under Western. I call it's under Western control because McDonald's, Burger King, Shake Shack, Slim Chicken, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Taco Bell, every fast food restaurant of note in the United States is there, as well as you got a lot of local Turkish offerings, and I mean it's just it's incredible. Palestinians, that's their land, and no international organization, no amount of money is going to buy them off. I mean that's what we're witnessing today is so remarkable that after 15 months of outright murder by the Israelis, the Palestinians are saying, we're heading back. We're heading back north. They're going to reoccupy. There's not going to be an unemployment problem in Palestine, in Gaza for years to come. And while that's going on, though, the Israel is stepping up its attacks in the West Bank. And so the fighting's escalating there. That Israel, I've said it all along since the beginning, Israel cannot fight its way out of this. It can't kill its way to peace. It's going to have to sit down and actually negotiate with the Palestinian people. The problem is the Palestinian Authority is just a corrupted, compromised institution. It won't be the one that comes up with a solution. And Israel does not have the logistics and the military force to sustain operations there in southern Lebanon and in the Golan and in the West Bank. That's why, they're pulling out of, key locations in Gaza. And so those troops are going to get redeployed. But that, freeing up those reserves to be able to reinforce, send them elsewhere doesn't eliminate the broader problem that the Israeli military faces, that it's a reserve force, and the fighting they are not equipped to fight a protracted war like Russia is in Ukraine. These guys, the Israelis are good for a one-night stand. They can do the quick operations. Don't ask them to sustain, because they have problems on the sustainment front. So this, they're going to try to, the longer they try to hang on in Lebanon, actually, the more it strengthens the position of Hezbollah. There's something to be said for having an established order, because at least within an established order, what sort of where the vulnerable points of vulnerability are, where the points of power are, what leverage, where you can work that. When you have something like this government, cobbled together government of HTS, you sort of have to start all over trying to figure how do we develop relationships. The Israelis, I believe, based upon what I've read and heard, have been very effective at penetrating Bashar al-Assad's government, and so they had key intelligence assets in the military. And also in the intelligence service, security service. Well, a lot of those folks are now gone. They're not welcome around HTS. So that means the Israelis have to go back in and forge new ties. Maybe they will, but it is, I never rule out the possibility that these HTS folks, they have their own agenda. They have their own goals, and those may not coincide with that of Israel.